Welcome back, mystery lovers, to another chapter of A History of Murder. Thank you for joining me again. Today we're going to be reading chapter 14, but I'll just give you a little quick shot of the books. And remember, The Present Predicament is also in this series. They're both available in ebook and paperback versions these days. And then, a little surprise, I wrote a picture book. And this just came out recently. It's called The Late Bird Gets Pasta, and I'm going to include the links for it below as well. It is also available as an ebook or a print book on Amazon. So check that out. If you have little ones in your family, I think you'd really enjoy this one. So, all right, let's get started. Chapter 14, Gone in a Whisper. If you'll remember, last chapter, Grandma Lily admitted that she burned the letters from her friend Nancy, and Chloe and her were kind of at odds because of that. Chloe felt like there was probably some really important clues in those letters, and now they're gone. So we'll get started on 14. As a peace offering, I brewed a pot of Grandma's favorite sweet, spicy tea and took it to the backyard sitting area where I had found Grandma that afternoon. I expected her to be in her favorite Adirondack, but she wasn't there. I sat the tea tray down and noticed the back gate was open. Beyond the tall fence, Grandma still owned a few acres. It was only scrub brush and trees, but it was my playground as a child, and later, as a teenager, it was a place to sneak off and be alone with Blake. That very land adjoined the proposed development area. I shivered, thinking about a glitzy hotel or franchise pancake house within throwing distance of our century-old mansion. It would ruin so much. Grandma Lily stood a few yards outside the fence, staring out in that direction. I learned about the proposed development today, I said, motioning to where Champion Hospitality wanted to build. If it gets approved, it will be devastating. You aren't the only one who feels that way, Chloe. I have faith that our city government will do the right thing. There's a lot of us who have signed the petition. She turned to face me. I'm sorry that I burned the letters without talking to you first. I got scared. What did you always tell me? No use crying over spilt milk. We're going to figure this whole thing out, Grandma. Letters or no letters. I drew her into a hug and asked her to sit to talk with me. She nodded in agreement before closing the gate behind us. We went to the sitting area. Grandma, I took the chair at her side. Yes, dear? She was pouring us each a cup. I need to tell you something. What? Jeannie mentioned that Art's boss Mariah seemed mad at him recently. I went to the opera house to talk to her. And? She was nice enough. She seemed sad about Art's death, but also a little defensive. Grandma frowned. I don't know her very well, but Art treated her almost fatherly. No doubt his passing will leave a big hole at the opera house. I'd guess what you took for defensiveness is simply the grief of losing him. You're probably right. I wasn't sure how to tell her the next part. To get a chance to talk with Mariah, I might have given her the impression that you were planning his funeral and want to hold it at the opera house. Grandma Lily gave an ironic smile and raised her brows. I suppose that in the role of his girlfriend, that might be expected. Goodness, can you imagine if I had to give the eulogy for that jerk? I laughed. Fortunately, his daughter will be in charge of all that. Art's daughter? Surprised at myself, I felt a little pang of jealousy that we might not get to keep little Jed in the end. Grandma nodded and took a sip of tea. Her name is Alice, and she's difficult, to say the least. She and Art have been in a feud for a few months. She always has her hand out for money. Thanks to Nancy, he's had it to give to her. Not long ago, after their umpteenth fight, he asked her to stop contacting him. Add Alice to the list of people that had it out for him, I said. List? While I was at the opera house, I also met a man named Malcolm. He apparently wants Art's job. Do you know him? Grandma grimaced. Malcolm Griggs. Now there's a good suspect. Art didn't care for him. He said Griggs was nosy. What's that mean? She frowned. He didn't explain, which wasn't usual. Art was notoriously tight-lipped. What about William Weston? I asked her. He's harmless. Annoying, yes, but completely harmless. The very mention of William's name seemed to irritate her. Are you afraid of him? Is that why you ran off? Me? Afraid of William? No. He's an old blowhard who's made a few passes at me over the years. I made it clear I wasn't interested. He likes to blame Art for the fact I didn't want to date him. That's all. He seems to have Art pegged, though. He called him a rogue and a lech, I said. William might be a good judge of character, but I'm still not interested. Back to this list of yours. I counted on my fingers. Well, our suspects are Alice, Malcolm, Mr. Weston, and you. Me? All the evidence points to it. Garner believes in my innocence, Chloe. Garner is a police officer, I said, my voice rising, and at times the police accuse innocent people of terrible crimes, but maybe you've forgotten my experience in these matters. Grandma Lily reached out and put her hand on my knee, softening the tension in both of us. Maybe you're right. It can't hurt to learn the truth ourselves, just in case, she said. You need to explain something to me, I said. What, dear? She asked. I swallowed hard. Why did Art have your ribbon, I hesitated to add, around his neck? Before Grandma Lily spoke, she took the blanket draped over the back of her chair and wrapped it around her. I gave it to him when he returned to visit last night. He dropped by to see me when the show let out earlier than expected. I might have woken you to join us, but you weren't exactly in a pleasant mood when you turned in. I looked at her with genuine bewilderment. I had driven almost 8 hours under the assumption you were on your deathbed. I think I had the right to be upset. She smiled. Okay, I'll give you that. The hair ribbon was our little thing. Whenever we got ready to say goodnight, I'd undo the ribbon in my hair and tie it around Art's wrist. When we saw each other next, he'd put the ribbon back in my hair. Oh my goodness, that is so romantic. Don't get all sappy on me. Grandma Lily raised one brow. I was playing that man like a fiddle. Suddenly, her expression changed. But then my ribbon was used to... She reached up and untied the strand she was wearing today from her ponytail. She studied it closely. I wanted to punish the man and make him pay Nancy's family back, but I didn't want him dead. She looked at me with sorrow in her eyes. I took the narrow white strip of fabric from her fingers and laid it on the table. We'll find out who did this, Grandma. Afterward, we can tell Chief Garner everything about Nancy. I think he'll help us. I hope so. You know, lately, I thought I was almost there. What do you mean? Art was acting differently. I thought he was about to make his move, maybe ask me to marry him so he could get to my money too. How was he behaving? Sort of preoccupied or nervous, she explained, like he might pop the question. Grandma dabbed at the tears in her eyes with the edge of the blanket. Her gesture reminded me of something significant, but at that moment, I couldn't say what. Grandma Lily went on. I don't know. Maybe it was something else altogether, but he was stewing, that's for sure. I wished he had told her what was bothering him, because maybe he had something else going on besides competing with Malcolm and Weston, fighting with Alice, and charming Grandma Lily. Just then, I heard someone walking down the driveway, headed in this direction of our backyard. Their footsteps crunched on the gravel. The person seemed to slow at the place where I found Art. I gulped. Could it be the killer returning to the scene of the crime? But when he appeared from around the side of the house, I saw that it was Chief Garner. He was wearing running shorts with a white t-shirt and carrying a book under his arm. It seemed he was here for the Poison Pen Book Club after all. Geez, this man dressed more casually every time I saw him. I stopped myself before envisioning him wearing something even more skimpy, but not before checking out his legs. "What are you two doing out here?" he smiled. "Oh dear, I didn't realize the time. I'd better get prepared," Grandma said. She got up and was gone in a whisper. Okay, that does it for chapter 14. It was a good one. We're putting some more clues together. We're finding out how Grandma was really feeling about the situation. And yeah, it's getting good. So Garner's back in the picture. And I will be patiently awaiting to read chapter 15 to you next week. Until then, thank you for joining me. And don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, maybe leave me a comment, share the videos if you're enjoying them with your friends. And I appreciate you being part of my cozy community. Bye-bye.